great pleasure that I get an opportunity to introduce someone who you all know, or most of you know, Jacqueline Rudloff. Jacqueline is currently living in New York City, just a little bit north of Soho in an area called Flatiron. And she'll give you a few more details about that. But I had the pleasure of talking to Jacqueline just this past week, maybe a little over a week ago for a period of time. And as we were talking, I realized that she has such a unique opportunity to share what's happening in New York City as someone living through it, that I thought she might be a great speaker. So I forwarded that suggestion to B. B agreed, and here we now have Jacqueline. Jacqueline left us back in September 2018 for good cause. She was working with Deutsche Bank as vice president, legal affairs, I believe that was her title. Then she moved on to New York because she was given an excellent position at CIBC, Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce. And she has continued to work for that bank, and I'm sure they've been as impressed with her as Deutsche Bank was, and of course, as we always were. Some of you may not know, though, that at one time, Jacqueline was a paramedic. And so she has a very deep knowledge of medicine, and therefore can share some of her perspective on that part of what's happening in New York City. Then, of course, she went to law school. I think it was Florida Coastal, but she can correct me if I'm wrong. And then on to her various employment, culminating currently in CIBC. Wonderful person. We still have Josh, her husband of 15 years, sequestered down here. He's an animator, IT kind of person, artist, artistic individual. And they are just about to have their 15-year anniversary. Hopefully, Jacqueline can get down here to spend it with him in real time, rather than trying to do this by a Zoom meeting or FaceTime. But anyway, it's great to have Jacqueline. And Jacqueline, please share with us what you've experienced.
Well, thank you, Past President Dr. Roby, and I can't tell you how much I appreciated that phone call. And I'm still looking for the bill in the mail, because while you called to ask me about this, I went, oh, there's a doctor on the phone and there's COVID, and probably spent an hour asking you questions and grilling you. So thank you for that. And thanks to everyone here for allowing me to come back and actually feel like a little bit of home in this crazy time and have the opportunity to speak with you. It is a huge, huge honor to me. This club was always very, very near and dear to my heart. And I have to say, happy Cinco de Mayo and Taco Tuesday. They line up today. Finally, 2020 got something right. So I hope you all get some tacos, or at least some Cinco de Mayo happiness in your lives today. And thanks to everybody else that's reached out to me or given me some humor or a nice email along the way. Past President Barry, you've been great at keeping in contact, and it's been amazing to see how many other Rotarians throughout the district have also reached out during this time. So I really, really appreciate it. You don't know what a phone call or an email or how far it goes when you're sitting in a 400 maybe square foot apartment for 6 weeks of your life. So thank you, thank you, thank you. But today I was asked to kind of speak about the boots on the ground experience, as Past President Dr. Roby was speaking about. So I thought what I would do is kind of, if you haven't had the opportunity to watch a Governor Andrew Cuomo briefing on what's going on in New York, I highly encourage you to, if for no other reason than just to see a great example of good leadership and just a great speaker and genuine nice person. And so I thought I would kind of follow his format today and kind of start with giving you just some facts for what we learned today from that briefing, give you an overall experience. And then, as I mentioned, I brought my friend Clint, who has unfortunately or fortunately, we'll see how it goes, but had a very upfront and close experience with COVID. So I thought you might enjoy hearing about his experience and what that looked like. Media reports on things in various ways, and so my big goal in life being up here is to just kind of give you the real feel of things, so that it doesn't always look like an apocalyptic, disaster. But obviously it is a very serious disease, and we're having to take a lot of unprecedented manners in how we proceed with everything. So just if you're a numbers person, this morning it was reported, and this is New York City, this is not New York, but it was reported that we have currently 170,534 cases, which means that we increased by 1,689 by yesterday, which we don't want to have anybody still contracting the disease, but I have to tell you that's very far down. And I thought it might be interesting just to kind of show you the breakdown. It's not widely reported, but I think it lends itself to some really interesting hypotheses about this disease, just on how it's impacting each of the boroughs. So the least impacted borough, Staten Island, they currently have around 12,000 cases. Manhattan is actually the second impacted, with 21,000 cases. After that, the Bronx follows with 39,000 cases, then Brooklyn with 45,000, and Queens with 53,000. So it's been really interesting because this all kind of started out with, we saw a lot of celebrities, Tom Hanks, some of the bigger names in our daily lives or our American TV lives, reporting that they were diagnosed with this. But in New York, it's kind of been two-found. It's been, the disease has disproportionately affected minorities and folks that are not in, the best economic situations, which points to, a density problem, because a lot of times in public housing or in smaller neighborhoods, you have, families that are grouping together in much larger numbers than others. But the interesting thing to me is that we have a lot of cases in Queens, which that's where both of the major airports are located, but it's also where a lot of families live as well. Manhattan, and this will kind of go to the timeline that I'm going to kind of give you on what my experience has been like, has less cases than I would have anticipated. But part of that, I think, is because a lot of folks that live in Manhattan have secondary homes in Long Island or in Connecticut or in Westchester. And so I don't think we've had the same quote unquote density that we typically see in Manhattan, along with the fact that most of our tourists aren't here because travel has been restricted. But I just want to give you that kind of factual overview of what we're looking at today. It's really interesting, but there continues to be better and better news, and that things are improving, although hopefully they will improve quicker. We're all anxious for that, especially after we just had the most beautiful weekend here. And so folks were out, and, they need to be, but at the same time, you have to be careful. So hopefully we can speed up that progress. So just for a timeline, I was actually in Jacksonville on March 1st when New York received its first case, which was a Midtown Manhattan lawyer. Of course, that would happen. Am I still with you guys? No.
Yes, you are still with us.
Okay, sorry. I have a Mac, and so everything is connected, and so when anything happens, it happens all together. So sorry about the interruption. I was trying to figure out how to not let that happen, but I've not been able to do that even, yeah, sorry. So I was actually in Jacksonville on March 1st when the first case was diagnosed, which was a Manhattan attorney who unfortunately lost his life. But what was in it, he literally worked in a building around the corner from where I work, which is right across the street from Grand Central Terminal, if you've been to New York. And what happened is when he was actually a resident of the Westchester area, which if you were following the news back in March, was where kind of the first big, concentrated outbreak happened in New York. So, and he wound up, the news reported, obviously, I'm going off of news reports, not talking to him directly, but the news reported that he wound up infecting over 50 people just from the different contacts that he had had. And before long, just within a few days, by the time I'd gotten back to New York, which was about around March 9th, there were almost 500 cases in that area. And so on March 5th or March 6th, somewhere around that time frame, no, I apologize, March 9th or March 10th, that's when the National Guard actually came in and set up a containment zone. So that's when stuff started feeling really, really real at the office, because we, on my floor especially, we work with people that are commuting in from Westchester. So the containment, by the way, wasn't an outbreak quarantine in the movies. People were free to come and go. It just meant that the National Guard went in and made sure that people had food and closed down schools and cleaned things. So it wasn't as dramatic as a lot of the media portrayed it to be, but nonetheless, while we were sitting there, knowing that the person across from us is commuting on the bus that came from that place, we felt a little bit like sitting ducks. So on March 12th, I was actually sent home to work from home because I have asthma, so I'm higher risk for the disease. So if I were to contract it, it would be a lot harder on me, most likely. So I started working from home on March 12th. And walking home on March 12th was like walking home on any other day. There were people walking beside me. There were, horns honking. There were cars. Everything was proceeding as normal. But by that weekend, by March 19th, a few days later, the governor had said, we're gonna stay at home. And one of the interesting things that came from that is the media automatically went, we're gonna shelter at home. And I learned very quickly that shelter at home versus stay at home are two very different things. Shelter at home is used if there's an active shooter or like a tornado or something of like imminent danger that you need to cover yourself with. Stay at home means you can go get groceries, you can go get what you need, but just don't go anywhere that you don't have to. And in the meantime, the restaurants are only gonna, very similar to Jacksonville, or allow for takeout and delivery. Well, what was interesting, and the reason why I wanted to bring up kind of some of the numbers earlier with, how the different boroughs have been affected, is on that March 22nd, most of the restaurants that I know or that I frequent or that I meet friends at or that are in my direct area couldn't afford to do partial service, so they just shut down. So on March 22nd, it kind of became like a ghost town in the area that I'm at, which I literally live around the corner from the Flatiron Building. It's in a lot of movies and it's on all the tour lists whenever you come to New York. I also live right by the park too, which is nice. But the interesting thing about where I live, and Clint can attest to it because he actually drove up on a bike this way towards the beginning, and it was just so different because we rely on a lot of foot traffic from people that work in institutions like mine, because I'm right by Barclays, I'm right by Credit Suisse, right by New York Life Insurance. So there's lots of professionals in that area that offer, foot traffic, and there's also lots of tourists. I can't tell you how many times I've been an amateur photographer on, taking pictures of people in front of the Flatiron Building. So all of a sudden, all of that went away, and all of the restaurants just stopped. And a lot of my friends that are in the service industry were completely unemployed for the foreseeable future, including my laundry person, which I'll get to in just a little bit. So the other thing about this area, and whenever I first got sent home, my first instinct was, okay, I need to go get supplies. I've been through a hurricane before, so supplies would be important. Well, whenever you think about Target in New York, it's about a fifth of the size as Target in Jacksonville. And they run out of anything that you need very quickly in situations like this. So there was one point where I went around looking for supplies like toilet paper, pasta, just staples to kind of give me some comfort that, if I couldn't go outside for a couple of weeks, I would have what I need. And so there have been times where it has taken me 4 or 5 different places around my area, including the other day, to be able to obtain those items. Now, I've never once gone without, never run out of anything, but it's just amazing that the conveniences that we once had have been like completely shuttered. So that also included my laundry. So a lot of the smaller laundry places at first, when the governor came out of the essential business, which I'm using these terms because you guys have had the same stuff in Jacksonville lately. So hopefully you know what I'm talking about when I say essential services. But on our list, at first it only said dry cleaning, or it only said laundry. So if you were a dry cleaning and laundry place, business owners weren't sure if they could stay open and they didn't want to get fined. So the place where I had to get all of that taken care of closed. So I guess about 3 weeks ago, I finally gave up and found a corporate place that wound up losing all of my laundry. And I got it back eventually. But after that, it was like, okay, I'm going to hand wash everything. So what's been so interesting is that it's harder to go outside on certain days because there's not enough foot traffic. So whenever you go outside on a rainy day or on a cold day, you really don't have a lot of the normal like New York people around you that kind of buffer out the more scarier people. I mean, anybody and everybody is always out there, but there's just comfort in like having people around and, that you can at least scream or something if something were to go wrong. So there's been, days where, because it's been so unseasonably cool for the spring here, it's just, stay at home and if you're going to go for a walk, do it in your apartment, which I have literally done 10-mile walks in my apartment on more days than one, just so I could get a walk in. I can tell you it is 12 steps from the corner of my living room to my front door. So it takes over 500 laps of doing that. So it's, but you have to adapt, right? So then, you're living in this super sophisticated city where you once had, food delivery. You once had some of the, best food that you could possibly get. You could meet up with friends. You could, walk down the street. You could go for a run at 11 o'clock at night if you wanted. And as long as you were, quasi-aware, you'd be more than fine. I've done it on more than one occasion. All of that, basically went away on March 22nd. So it kind of felt like Vegas for a little bit, because in conjunction with all of that, my entire company basically sent 40,000 people home to work from home. And they usually have about 5,000 people using the servers from that kind of system. And now all of a sudden it was at 40,000. So we would get a note every single day saying, okay, you can work from 10 to 3 today, or you can't get on until 5 today. You can get on at 7 a.m., but you have to be off before the market opens. Or we've had a complete system crash and you can't get on at all today. So then all of a sudden you're negotiating things at midnight. And then you're trying to get up the next morning, in time to get to the daily, market call, which has also been super interesting, because working in an investment bank and being on the front lines of the investment aspect of things has given me a lot of information that the media doesn't necessarily report, because the investment bank is working on, securing its position and helping its customers from all of the different strategies. And as most of you know, the stock market really crashed about a month ago in a really bad way. And then the Fed actually reduced the rates when I was still in Jacksonville in March, but then they did it again, and it really presented some challenges for the bank. But luckily, our bank has been really good at the CARES program and the payday, the payday protection. And so we've really been able to help. We were one of the number 1 or number 2 banks in Canada and the United States to actually be able to get as many loans out as we did to customers in order to help small businesses continue paying employees, so that more employees didn't have to be laid off and all of that stuff. So it's been a very interesting experience just from what daily life looked at, but it has been an experience that's also produced, a lot of really interesting and cool silver linings, because I think when we all come out of this, I know that I for one am going to feel much more happy about a lot of different things that I maybe took for granted earlier before, or had become complacent at. And it's easy to say, I'm not going to be complacent, and then you're totally complacent, and then all of a sudden everything goes away and you're like, holy cow. And I think that it's been really interesting to see what leadership looks like from all kinds of different counts, and to see how different people respond to the crisis. For example, when everything was first happening, Mayor de Blasio did not want to close the schools. And the reason why he didn't want to close the schools was because that would mean that there would be an exorbitant amount of children, going back to kind of the projects that you guys are working on, of kids that would not get to eat. And so it took longer to close the schools here than it maybe should have. And I'm sure there will be a million opinions written about how all of this went down, when this is all through and over. But it probably took a little bit longer because our mayor is very, very, very thoughtful and caring about people, making sure that people get a meal to eat. So they made the decision not to close the schools for a longer time than maybe some of the other states reacted to that. But then what they did was they instituted a meals program. So all kids could stop by school every single day, and they would give them 3 meals for that day. And then about 3 weeks ago, they expanded that to any New Yorker, no questions asked. So I thought that was really amazing, in that kids, especially the kids that are the kids of the frontline workers, didn't have to, and they got free childcare, or they've been getting, childcare and being taken care of on that end as well. But it's been really interesting to see how that was such a huge part of the response here locally. And it was very different than probably the response from a statewide position, because there's such a unique situation in downstate New York than there is upstate New York. The other silver lining, I have an exhibit for you. I started right before all this happened. I had agreed to start volunteering at a shelter because I didn't want to. I don't have a good way to sanitize everything when I come in because my place is tiny, and so I had been doing a lot of homeless outreach with the Rotary Club that I'm in. But I didn't want to inadvertently expose myself, especially when my company was doing, so many nice things to make sure that I was protected. So I had volunteered to start fostering this special needs dog, and her name is Nina, and she likes to sleep, and she wore her dress for you today. You can see her. But she has been just like one of the coolest things that has come out of this, because if you have to be alone for 6 weeks and try not to go completely mad, having a little companion that keeps you busy, which she does a very good job of, has been really neat. And so it was interesting because I had started doing this before everything went crazy. And then, and then when everything started happening, the shelters went crazy. And so people started fostering like crazy just for that sole part of the mental health aspect, the company, the comfort. And I guess that's the kind of the last big thing is the mental health aspect. It's always been one of the things I've been very, very passionate about, just in like helping people with that and recognizing it. And sorry, phone went off again and I prevented it. So this situation has given me like a real life like glimpse of what all of that can feel like, even though I never expected to like sit in this apartment. This apartment is built to sleep, shower, and occasionally heat up macaroni and cheese. It is not built for hand washing. It is not, I don't have a home gym. It is not built for gourmet, like homemade meals. I don't even have a freezer. So having to improvise and then also deal with, not being able to be close to family, not having a hug. You guys all know how much of a hugger I am. Like today, I was so excited for today. And I was like, oh, if I could only run in and just get all my hugs, So not having a hug for, gosh, what's it been, like almost 2 months now? I mean, at times that's a really heavy thing to weigh on. And so when I, say that it means a whole lot to, have phone calls or have emails, I know more than ever how important they are. And I know that I'm personally going to try and do better about doing that for, folks that I know that maybe aren't necessarily going through COVID, but might need an extra hug or smile for the day. But with that, I wanted to give Clint a little bit of time because, like I said, he had a very direct connection with COVID, and his experience is really interesting. And I thought it might offer some perspective for what things look like when you actually are introduced to it. So Clint, you want to unmute yourself?
Sure. So thank you, Jacqueline. So yes, she's right. I wasn't able to get a test previously. My last day in the office was March 13th. We've been working from home since then. That's a big adjustment for all of us. But for me, I'm active on my local community board and block associations. And the state was still holding meetings that we were required to attend through the following week. So I was still out and about and interacting with some public at that point. So I don't know if but I started having symptoms on the 19th, started with some backaches and neck aches and just general soreness that I attributed to working from home and propping my computer up on the ottoman and sitting on the couch. But then as a headache started developing, and then the next day was a Thursday, I developed a fever. I started going through these cycling fevers where I was just dripping in sweat. I would wake up at night. My pillow, I probably could have wrung out my pillow. And this cycled for about 2 or 3 days with those intense fevers. After the first day, I spoke to my doctor. He did a televisit. and said that it sounded like all these symptoms were lining up. I didn't have the severe respiratory symptoms. I had some coughing, some dry coughing, but I had the fever, the body aches, the headaches. I had some gastrointestinal issues, which at first they were saying wasn't part of it. Then they said, yes, they're now finding that was part of it. So there's a lot of unknowns. But my doctor said, right now, he said, you can treat your symptoms with some over-the-counter cold and flu type medicine. But he said, right now, they were only testing people that have been in direct contact with someone who tested positive. And even to this day, I don't know. I know some people that have tested positive, but I wasn't in direct contact with those people within the last few weeks before I had symptoms. And if you went to one of the testing centers, they had a database and you had to actually give a name and they would confirm that that person had tested positive. So my doctor said, look, you're not going to be able to get a test and you're just going to expose yourself if you don't have it. So he recommended me not even try to get a test for a while. After my symptoms cleared up, mine lasted about 5 or 6 days. Then I kind of went back to normal. My doctor followed up with me last week and said that they now had some FDA released tests that have been approved. He gave me many caveats as they are still not 100% accurate. They could give a false positive or false negative. They don't know what the antibodies mean, but he sent me for a test. I was able to get the antibody test and I do have the antibodies. So I must have most likely had it at some point, but it was just interesting how much misinformation was out there and people would tell you, oh, you can go do this, you can go do that. But then there wasn't a lot of clear directives of what to do if you actually had it, other than going to the testing centers, which they wouldn't have accepted me. So that was my personal experience of dealing with it. And I, knock on wood, had a very mild case of it. I don't think I have any lasting effects from it. And I feel like I've fully recovered now. So, but that was my experience.
Thank you both. Any questions for Jacqueline or Clint?
This is Mike. Can I ask a question of Clint? Clint, did they tell you that you had to quarantine yourself for in a certain way or anything like that?
Yeah. So in the beginning, when I had the televisit with my doctor, which was like the second day after I had the symptoms, he said that they were recommending 7 days of complete quarantine. And he, at that point, even now, there still wasn't ever a full lockdown. You were allowed to go out for groceries or pick up food. But he said, do not leave your apartment, stay in for a full 7 days or 72 hours after any symptoms are completely resolved. So in my case, my symptoms were kind of gone on day 5. I think I kind of waited till I don't think I left till the full 8th day. But he said, if you're on day 7 and you're still having symptoms, he said, wait another full 72 hours till all symptoms are completely gone.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Clint, Dan Roby. What was it like to know that you had to be in that apartment by yourself? You couldn't call your mother, your father, your brother, your girlfriend to come over because you would have been fearful of cross-contaminating, infecting them. Because normally when we get sick like that, the way you described it, we're comforted by other people coming to help us out, make us soup, wet our forehead, stuff like that. But the real tragic thing about this disease is that people are dying being isolated from their loved ones. And so thank goodness you recovered successfully the way you did. But even so, how did that feel?
It was a scary thing. The thing, I was never completely down because what would happen, and my doctor told me that one thing they were seeing was it cycled. So I would wake up in the morning, my fever was gone, and I may not even have had a headache. As the day went on, my fever would start to go back up and the headache would come, the body aches would start. So I would be good for the first half of the day. I could kind of be normal. And then sometime between, lunch and dinner, I would start having symptoms. So then I would usually eat and then just kind of go to bed. So luckily for me, I wasn't knocked down by it, but I know some people had a lot of other symptoms. But yeah, there was definitely that, and knowing that I couldn't even luckily I had food, but I really wasn't even comfortable having a friend bring over food for me because you could be exposing them.
Any other questions?
one more question for Clint. I'm just curious if you've had the opportunity to maybe donate any of the plasma for the plasma research that's going on.
I have not. So I just got it was just last week when they released the tests that my doctor felt were the most accurate that were available. So I just got my tests on Sunday. My results came back in, and my doctor had emailed and said he's going to set up a follow-up appointment to discuss those type of things. So at the moment, I haven't followed up. We need to set up the appointment to follow up with him about that. But he mentioned in the beginning, he said, we'll wait till your results come back before we get further into those discussions. But he said there are various trials out there and studies that you can be involved in as far as the antibodies. And, but he told me, he said, even if you test positive for the antibodies, I don't want you to change a thing. Still wear your mask, still social distance, because he said, we're not sure what level of immunity, if you have immunity, what level it is, how long it lasts, and if you're immune to the various different strains that are out there. So,
Jacqueline, I got a question for you. Gary, do you want to ask something?
I was just going to ask Jacqueline, what are the streets like around the Flatiron building now?
Oh, I was meaning to kind of expand on that a little bit, but like I said, because I think there's been so many people that have like left Manhattan for other places, there is just not the same foot traffic that there once was. Now, if you go out on a sunny day, like this last weekend, you have plenty of people out. This past weekend, they opened the lawns at Madison Square Park too, so you could actually go to a picnic, and it almost felt like normal life for a few minutes again. But other than that, like I haven't been out after dark in over 6 weeks. And a lot of times in the morning, before the kind of things get going, because New York is a little bit of a later city, it is quiet. But then the caveat to that is that I know when all the trucks deliver now. And so all the stores are so much smaller around me, so they run out of stuff a lot quicker. So sometimes you just have to like brave it. And, like I feel like Mad Max sometimes. I'll have like all my bags on me, and I'm like, and like, now you have to have the mask on you and you've got your head on a swivel, and my really tall friends that I have that have been so great to me, they go outside no problem, but they're like Viking sized, and I'm not Viking sized. And so one day they were schooling me on how to try and look mean, but you can't even look mean with a mask. And so it's a whole lot different. And it was so funny because when I got asked to go to a picnic, a social distancing picnic on Saturday that I went to over at the park, and reality hit because I went into the bathroom to put my lipstick on, and I had it all on, and then I went to grab the mask, and I was like, oh yeah.
Hey, Jacqueline, let me ask you, what is the general consensus, if there is such thing, as to easing the lockdown restrictions in New York City?
Okay, so there's actually a really cool chart that Governor Cuomo came out with yesterday, and it's very, very detailed as to what region will open up and what is required for each region to open up right now. And the main thing that would probably resonate with you, Dr. Roby, is that we have to have a 1-to-1 transmission rate or below, and there have to be enough tracers per 100,000 people, and death. I mean, these are the main points, but I think there's like 10 across the spreadsheet. And then deaths have to be down, below a certain number per 100,000 people. So that's for each region, but in New York City itself, one of the things that is really being looked at, and that is probably why it's going to be slower for New York City to open up, is going to be done regionally. So they're not going to open up New York City unless they can also open up New Jersey and Long Island, Connecticut, because it's such a commuter city. So it's like if New Jersey's still kind of, I think they've peaked now, but they peaked behind us. So they're still behind us. But if we open up without and allow them in, or we open up something here that causes everybody to want to come here, then we basically have the chance to kind of reverse all the work that we've done. So it's going to be, so May 15th is like the magic date for upstate, but then it's all going to be done in phases. So phase 1 is construction and manufacturing. And then it's a 2-week period after that because they want to monitor numbers to make sure that there's not spikes. And then phase 2 is part of some essential businesses, and then it goes all the way out to phase 4. And interestingly enough, education is in phase 4, but there will be a 2-week period at a minimum between each phase.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Jacqueline and Clint, do you mind sticking around for a few minutes in case others have questions? We're at 1:30, we'll end the meeting, but people may have some more questions. Do y'all have time to stick around?
Sure. Yep. No problem.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you.
It's the new normal where we have all kinds of time at home now. So.
Yes, it is. Patty, you want to unmute yourself? And just as we have not confirmed our guest speaker for next week, so please just keep an eye out on for the gear. When that comes out, we'll announce our guest speaker. Also, the invitation for the meetings are at the end of that email. And with that, we will end our meeting.